Have you ever wondered why the most powerful men in history never begged to be liked? Why their presence was accepted without apology, their decisions feared more than loved, and their silence felt louder than any man's plea? Approval is the currency of the weak. It is begged for by those who haven't yet realized the rules of power are written not by those who need validation, but by those who control its supply. The one who begs to be accepted has already lost. Not because they are unworthy, but because they have made worth dependent on someone else's permission. And that is the greatest strategic mistake a man can make. You must never ask to be chosen. You must never perform to be accepted. The Machiavellian understands this. If they do not approve of you, make yourself the standard by which others are judged. Force them to adjust to your silence. Make your lack of desperation the loudest insult you could ever give. The moment you try to prove your value, you've made your value negotiable. You've placed it on a table where others can bid, appraise, devalue, discard, and worse, they will. Humans do not respect what comes with a smile and a lowered head. They respect what does not flinch when confronted, what does not change tone to avoid conflict, what refuses to beg, even when surrounded by knives. The man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated, and so he becomes the one everyone wants approval from. Because approval, in its darkest truth, is not given to the deserving, it is stolen by the untouchable. You will never be admired for being agreeable. You will be admired for being invincible. You must understand the psychological mechanics behind this. When you chase someone's validation, you give them a mirror in which they appear superior. Your very act of seeking makes them feel like the judge. This shifts the dynamic instantly. They no longer see you as an equal, but as someone trying to earn their time, their attention, their favor. You create an imbalance, and once the scale tips, it's hard to recover. They start testing you, with silence, with distance, with rejection, not because they are worthy of doing so, but because you've handed them the power to decide your worth. The more you try to correct it, the deeper you sink. The only remedy is withdrawal, sudden, cold, unapologetic. The man who does not ask why he was overlooked, who does not demand explanations, who does not knock twice, that man becomes a mystery, and mystery always wins. Begging for approval is a form of self-abandonment. You trade your instincts for applause. You compromise your boundaries to keep harmony. You become agreeable to maintain connection. And in doing so, you train people to believe that your loyalty is for sale, that your energy is a product of their affection. But the man who moves without concern for external permission becomes dangerous, not because he is reckless, but because he is independent. And independence terrifies the manipulators. It is not violence that makes people fear you. It is your indifference to being excluded. The man who walks away with no resentment, no explanation, no glance back, he is the one who burns himself into memory. Because silence, when it's pure and chosen, is more powerful than 1,000 justifications. You must stop performing. Every time you exaggerate your kindness, smile through your discomfort, tolerate what you should reject, you are sending a silent message that your peace is optional, that your presence must be earned. And this is the root of powerlessness. The Machiavellian rejects this completely. He does not force people to like him. He forces people to question why they ever thought he needed them. His power comes from restraint, not excess. He speaks less when others seek answers. He offers nothing when others expect praise. He says no with ease, because he knows the one who can say no without fear is always more powerful than the one who cannot. You want them to like you. You want to be respected. You want to be invited, included, embraced. And yet, these desires make you their hostage. They sense it, the desperation, the subtle hunger for recognition. They feed on it, they test it, they withdraw affection just to see if you'll come crawling. And most do. But you, if you are to walk this path, you must be different. You must become untouchable, not by hiding, but by elevating. Your standards, your silence, your willingness to walk away. You must create the impression that your approval is scarce, that your time is limited, that your presence is a reward, not a request. And slowly, those who once ignored you will start whispering your name in rooms you no longer enter. The most brutal lesson you will ever learn is this. People respect you more when you disappoint them than when you please them, because disappointment signals boundary, and boundary signals value. A man who pleases everyone is nothing but a convenient tool, replaceable, predictable, forgettable. But the man who withholds, who selects, who disappoints without flinching, he becomes a force. His absence is noticed. His silence is questioned. His words, when they finally come, carry weight. Because he does not speak to be liked. He speaks to shift the balance of power. The hunger for approval is the fastest way to lose control. Because once they know you want their affection, they can make you dance for it. One breadcrumb of praise, and you're bending your principles. One glare of disapproval, and you're questioning your worth. They don't need to manipulate you with words. They only need to withhold. That's the trap. The moment you attach your sense of self to their reaction, you become a puppet. Your strings tied to their moods, your voice tuned to their expectations. Machiavelli knew that the true prince never plays this game. He creates distance. He lets curiosity ferment into obsession. He starves them of access until his absence tastes more powerful than their presence. That's how you flip the script. By refusing to chase the narrative, and instead becoming the silence they can't ignore. Approval is not given to those who ask for it. It is granted to those who make others question their own worth. You don't walk into a room trying to be accepted. You walk in with such self-possession that the room has to adjust to you. No nervous gestures, no overcompensating charm, no scanning for cues. You exist as if the outcome has already been decided in your favor, and if it hasn't, you make no effort to correct it. You let others do the work of re-evaluating, because when you treat your own value as non-negotiable, the world starts to wonder what it missed. The man who never chases validation becomes the benchmark. He becomes the one who sets the tone, simply because he refused to adapt to theirs. Understand this. Approval-seeking behavior is emotional debt. You think you're building connection, but you're accumulating interest. Every time you adjust yourself to please someone, they sense the debt, and soon they expect repayment. Not in love, not in gratitude, but in control. You owe them now. At least, that's what they believe. They will call in favors you never agreed to. They will demand apologies you should never give. And you will offer them because you've taught them that your sense of peace is for sale. But not anymore. From now on, every act of self-suppression is recognized as a betrayal. And every time you choose to protect your center instead of pacifying the room, you reclaim a piece of your soul. Let them think you're distant. Let them say you've changed. Let them believe you've become cold, arrogant, detached. That's fine, because what they call arrogance is often just the refusal to beg. What they call distance is simply the removal of access they never earned. And what they call coldness is the heat of someone burning the old script. Approval will always come with strings, but power comes from cutting them. You must stop explaining yourself. Every explanation is a confession. Every justification is a declaration of need. And the Machiavellian needs nothing. He lets them wonder. He lets them projections rot in silence. He never clarifies, because power thrives in ambiguity. What happens when you stop responding to guilt? When you don't rush to reassure them? When you stop cushioning your truth? Something terrifying begins to grow in their minds. Doubt. Doubt that they ever knew you. Doubt that they matter to you as much as they thought. Doubt that they can influence you anymore. And in that doubt, power shifts. They'll test you, accuse you, frame you as the villain. But you must not blink, because the moment you try to fix their perception, you've returned to their frame. Let them sit with the silence. Let them choke on the uncertainty. You are no longer a source of comfort. You are a disruption, and disruptions do not beg for permission. The mind craves certainty. That's why people pressure you for clarity, for answers, for emotional accessibility. But Machiavellian presence is not designed to soothe. It's designed to provoke, to make people rethink the stories they've told themselves. You are not a provider of comfort. You are a reminder that true power is not granted. It is assumed. That approval is not a gift. It is a tactic. That control is not loud. It is quiet, cold, and invisible. And once you see this, everything changes. You stop trying to earn favor. You stop trying to be seen. You start practicing the art of being felt, even when you're not around. That's power, not popularity, not applause, but the kind of presence that echoes even in silence. There will come a moment when someone withholds their affection, hoping it will make you chase. When they criticize you, hoping you'll crumble. When they withdraw, hoping you'll beg them to return. In that moment, you have two choices. You can fold and return to the role they've written for you, or you can rise, and let them face the silence they created. Let them feel what absence really means. Do not explain, do not defend, do not perform. Just stand still and let the discomfort reveal what was always one-sided, because the man who does not beg becomes the one they fear losing most. And fear, unlike love, cannot be faked. The reason people cling to approval is simple. They were raised on it like oxygen. As children, we learned that love was conditional. Praise followed obedience. Affection followed compliance. You were rewarded for playing the role others found convenient, and punished, silently or explicitly, when you deviated. So you adapted. You smiled when it hurt. You apologized when you were right. You made yourself small so others could feel big. And without realizing it, you trained your nervous system to equate approval with survival. But you are no longer a child, and the game has changed. Now, every time you shrink for someone else's comfort, you are reenacting your own betrayal. Every time you seek to be liked, you are announcing that your worth still belongs to someone else's hands, and that is unacceptable. From this point forward, your value is not up for discussion. Approval is a leash dressed as a compliment. They flatter you to domesticate you. They admire you to make you predictable. The praise feels good until it becomes an expectation, until every word you speak is filtered through how will they receive this, until your presence becomes a performance and your silence becomes a crime. But once you realize this, once you see how applause is weaponized to shape behavior, you begin to starve the mechanism. You start to speak without waiting for nods. You act without waiting for consensus. You walk into rooms knowing that being misunderstood is the price of being free. And the moment you accept that price, they can no longer touch you. The Machiavellian knows that to lead, to influence, to dominate, you must first become indifferent to being liked. He does not chase the crowd. He studies it, uses it, steers it, but never needs it. The crowd is volatile. Its love is temporary. Its loyalty is transactional. And he who depends on public affection becomes a slave to public mood. But the one who walks alone, who shapes himself in silence, becomes untouchable. He builds his character like a fortress, thick walls, narrow gates, no entry without purpose. And when people realize they must earn access, their respect deepens, because people do not value what is handed to them freely. They value what they had to reach for in the dark. You must become dangerous in your restraint. Learn to let people sit with your disapproval. Learn to say no and watch them flinch. Learn to remain unmoved when they accuse you of ego, arrogance, coldness. Their discomfort is not your emergency. Their confusion is not your cue to explain. You are not a therapist for their projections. You are not a punching bag for their insecurities. The less you react, the more they reveal. The quieter you become, the more power shifts in your direction. Because when you deny the world your energy, it starts to notice how much of it you gave before. And suddenly the absence you once feared becomes the force that defines your presence. You've been conditioned to fear solitude, to believe that isolation means failure. But Machiavelli would tell you the opposite. Solitude is clarity. It is where strategy is born. It is where the approval-addicted version of you dies, and in its place, a new figure emerges. One who does not crave applause, but commands silence. One who does not seek sympathy, but inspires fear. One who would rather walk alone in power than be surrounded in weakness. That kind of man is not made in noise. He is forged in withdrawal, in the stillness where identity returns to its source, not shaped by others, but reclaimed by force. When you stop being available for validation, people will test you. They will bait you with silence, with indifference, with disappointment. They will try to remind you of the role you used to play, the eager one, the agreeable one, the loyal one. Don't return. Let them speak to the ghost. Let them argue with the absence. Do not resurrect your old self to comfort their insecurity. That man is gone. What remains is someone who would rather be feared for his silence than loved for his surrender. Someone who knows that to be unshakable is not to be cold, but to be rooted. You are not withholding affection. You are withdrawing your dependency, and that shift is permanent. Eventually, they'll come back. Not because you begged, not because you reminded them of your worth, but because you vanished. And in that vanishing, they were left with their own reflection, and it terrified them. Your silence confronted their entitlement. Your absence exposed their weakness. Your lack of need rewrote the dynamic. And when they return, they will come different, measured, hesitant, respectful, or not at all. and you will not care, because the man who stopped begging is the man who has already won. Approval is a throne you must build inside yourself, and once you sit on it, no one else's applause will ever matter again. They will say you've changed, that you're distant now, harder to reach, less generous with your words, less soft with your presence, and they will be right. Because change was the point. You didn't come this far to stay accessible to everyone who drains you. You didn't grow just to remain familiar to those who only knew how to use you. And the truth is, they never truly valued you. They valued the version of you that needed their approval, the one that apologized before speaking, the one that tried to keep everyone happy, even when it tore you apart inside. That version of you was convenient, predictable, controllable, but now you are not here to soothe their ego. You are here to protect your power, and that means you will lose people, but you will never lose yourself again. The man who is no longer addicted to approval becomes terrifying, not because he is cruel, but because he is immune. Immune to manipulation, immune to flattery, immune to guilt. You cannot be shamed into obedience when you've already walked away from needing to be liked. You cannot be baited into reaction when silence has become your greatest weapon. The Machiavellian understands this. The one who speaks least holds the most weight. The one who cares least commands the most control. And the one who no longer seeks approval becomes the one from whom others seek it. Because in a world full of people trying to be chosen, the one who chooses himself becomes the standard. The most powerful words you will ever say are the ones you never speak. The disapproval you don't explain. The boundary you don't justify. The decision you don't defend. Because when you stop trying to be understood, you become incomprehensible to the weak. And that confusion, that mystery, creates fear. Not terror, not violence, but the deeper fear, the fear of losing influence, the fear of no longer being able to pull your strings. That is what makes them uncomfortable. You didn't fight, you didn't argue, you didn't explain, you just stopped showing up. And that silence will echo louder than any confrontation. You don't owe anyone your emotional exposure. You don't owe them your reasoning, your why, your story. Let them guess, let them fill in the blanks. Because whatever image they create of you in their mind, it will never be as controlled as the mask you used to wear for their comfort. That's the point. You are no longer available for their convenience. You are no longer emotionally subsidizing their dysfunction. You are no longer accessible to people who measure your value by how much of yourself you're willing to give away. And the less they understand you, the more they respect the space you've created. Power does not come from overexposure. It comes from precision, from restraint, from invisibility by choice. Most men crumble under the pressure to explain themselves, to prove they are still kind, still good, still lovable, even in distance. But approval is not proof of goodness. It is a leash. The world will reward you for being agreeable and then punish you the moment you stop. So let them punish, let them question, let them withdraw. Because the man who can stand still in the storm of rejection is the man who cannot be moved by anything. Rejection does not sting when you stop needing to be chosen. Disapproval does not scar when you realize that your value is not negotiable, and absence, once feared, becomes your fortress. They cannot touch you if you are no longer where they expect you to be. This is the hidden art of flipping the script. You don't rewrite the role they gave you. You leave the stage entirely. You stop trying to win a game they rigged against you. You stop begging for roles in stories where you were only ever cast to lose. The Machiavellian doesn't demand a new narrative. He becomes the one who writes it. Not by arguing, not by yelling, but by withdrawing, by detaching, by becoming unpredictable. And when the script collapses because you refuse to play your part, the audience is forced to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. That's how you win, not by being liked, but by becoming unforgettable. You will know you've arrived at power when your silence is felt more than your presence used to be, when your absence starts more conversations than your voice ever did, when the same people who once ignored you now measure their steps by your reaction, but you give them nothing. You owe them nothing, and in that nothing, you gain everything. Power, peace, freedom, not the kind that comes from domination, but the kind that comes from detachment. You are no longer a slave to the need for affirmation. You are no longer a product of their approval. You have become your own source, your own standard, your own fortress. And from that position, you no longer need to chase influence, because now influence chases you. What they once saw as warmth, they will now call arrogance. What they once praised as generosity, they will twist into selfishness. That's how the world reacts when you take back what it always believed was its property: your time, your peace, your presence. But understand this, they are not angry because you've changed. They are angry because you've stopped being useful. You've stopped bending. You've stopped performing. You've stopped treating your own energy like a public resource. And when a man reclaims his value, it forces everyone who took him for granted to confront what they were truly entitled to: nothing. That discomfort is not yours to soothe. That's the fire they must sit in, alone. You used to think boundaries would push people away. That saying no meant losing love. That distance meant rejection. But boundaries do not push people away. They reveal who was only there because you had none. And once revealed, you must not flinch. Do not chase after the ones who call your growth ego. Do not soften your truth to re-earn their approval. Do not contort yourself to fit the fragile image they need you to be. Because once you taste the calm of self-respect, the noise of manipulation becomes unbearable. The moment you no longer need anyone to clap for your decisions, you step into the most powerful version of yourself, the one who does not beg, not even in silence. When they can no longer use your desire to be liked, they will try something else. They will try to shame you, with silence, with distance, with passive-aggressive tones. But this is where most men break, when they feel the cold, when they feel misunderstood, when they feel alone. You will feel all of it, and you will survive all of it, because the kind of man who refuses to beg for approval is not immune to loneliness. He is simply unwilling to trade his peace to avoid it. They can call you stubborn, they can call you heartless. Let them speak, let them scream, but do not return to the altar of false connection just to be embraced again. Some hugs are traps, some smiles are weapons, and some relationships only exist to keep you small. You don't owe the world a version of you it can digest. You don't need to be palatable. You don't need to be simple. You don't need to be safe. Your complexity is not a flaw, it is a shield. Your silence is not emptiness, it is armor. And your refusal to explain yourself is not pride, it is power. Because the more you clarify, the more they distort. The more you justify, the more they rewrite. The man who explains nothing becomes the man they can no longer manipulate. The man who simply watches, unmoved, becomes the mirror in which their games die. You must become that mirror. Cold, honest, silent, and sharp enough to make them look away. Power does not come from being feared. It comes from being unreadable. The predator does not roar. He waits, watches, studies. The man who is feared cannot always control the room. But the man who is unknown, that man controls the story. They don't know how to guilt him. They don't know how to reach him. They don't know if they're winning or losing. And that uncertainty is what breaks them. So while they panic, you remain still. While they explain, you say nothing. While they attack, you remain untouched. Because your worth is no longer reactive. It is rooted, it is sovereign, and it is final. Every man who rises must go through this fire. The fire of rejection. The fire of being labeled difficult. The fire of losing those who only loved the version of him they could control. You must be willing to walk through it, alone, cold, and misunderstood. Because on the other side is not applause, it's not validation, it's silence. And in that silence, a new law is born. Your time is yours. Your peace is yours. Your energy belongs to no one but you. The people who remain, those who respect that silence, who honor that distance, they are rare, and they are worth keeping. The rest, let them go. The ones who needed you to be weak in order to feel strong will never celebrate your rise. And when they see you again, calm, unbothered, untouchable, they will feel it, not just your presence, but your absence. The absence of desperation, the absence of permission-seeking, the absence of weakness they once mistook for kindness. They will try to re-enter, they will test the door, but you will not open it, not out of revenge, but because you've changed the locks. You no longer speak the language of performance. You no longer walk the path of approval, and you will never again kneel at the feet of someone else's acceptance, because you are no longer interested in being liked. You are here to be respected, and respect, unlike approval, can only be given to a man who refuses to beg. Most people don't notice when you're too available until you're not. They don't value the comfort you provide, the stability you offer, the presence you maintain, until you remove it. And that removal, that absence, is not petty. It is not punishment. It is revelation. It shows them what they've mistaken for weakness was actually generosity. What they took for granted was discipline. What they assumed was dependence was choice. And when the choice disappears, so does their illusion of control. That is the Machiavellian strategy. Not to confront, but to vanish. Not to protest, but to deprive. Because in silence, they learn what your presence was truly worth. When you stop seeking their approval, you begin to see the strings behind their kindness. You begin to recognize praise as manipulation. You begin to feel the subtle pressure behind compliments, the invisible contracts hidden in affection. Be who I want you to be, and I'll like you. That is the deal. But once you break the contract, once you stop needing their applause to breathe, their tone changes. The smiles fade, the warmth cools, and you begin to understand that most people were never loving you. They were managing you. The real ones will adapt. The rest will leave. Let them. The cost of self-respect is high, but the price of begging is your soul. You must never flinch when you're called selfish for protecting your energy. Never blink when they say you've changed. You have. That's the point. You are no longer willing to participate in dynamics where your worth is dependent on your compliance. You are no longer accessible for emotional convenience. You are no longer performing acts of false humility just to maintain fragile connections. The man who is no longer desperate becomes dangerous, not because he harms, but because he cannot be harnessed. And in a world built on expectation, obedience, and approval-seeking, the man who is untamed becomes a threat to every manipulative system that once fed on his need to be liked. Detachment is not coldness. It is clarity. It is the refusal to suffer for imaginary obligations. It is the recognition that love that must be earned through exhaustion is not love, it is control. The Machiavellian man does not reject affection, he rejects dependence. He allows loyalty, but only when it's given freely, without demand. Because the moment someone believes they are entitled to your constant yes, your immediate answer, your unbroken smile, they are not loving you. They are using you. And to be used is worse than to be hated. At least hatred admits opposition. Manipulative approval pretends it's care when it's really a leash. You'll see this most clearly in the silence. In how people react when you stop performing. When you say no without softening it. When you walk away without explaining it. When you stay silent instead of defending it. The real ones, those who see your growth as strength, will respect it. The rest will collapse into confusion or hostility, not because you did something wrong, but because their script no longer fits. They relied on your need to be liked. They relied on your predictability. Now they are left with a version of you they cannot control. That's what power looks like. Not volume, not rage, but precision, absence, indifference. You will find yourself walking alone more often now, not because you're unloved, but because you've raised the price of admission. Your energy is no longer given away as proof of worth. Your presence is no longer a default setting. It is chosen. It is intentional. And that means some people will never sit with you again. That is not a tragedy. It is a filtration system. The ones who remain after the withdrawal, the boundaries, the cold silences, they are the ones who saw you, not just the access you gave. And when you find them, you'll understand that being misunderstood was never the loss. Being fake to be accepted, that was the loss. And you'll never go back. Let them say you're heartless. Let them say you've changed. Let them create their own explanations for your absence. What matters is that you are no longer in the business of proving yourself. You are no longer available to people who only value what they can consume. You have become your own center. You have built your own mirror. And in that mirror, there are no masks, no performance, no apology, just presence, just truth, just sovereignty. You are not here to win everyone. You are here to win yourself back. And from that place, you do not beg, you do not chase, you do not shrink. You stand, you wait, you walk alone, if necessary. Because even in solitude, you are still whole. If you've made it this far, it means something in you is already shifting. A part of you is tired of shrinking, tired of seeking, tired of bending to be liked. A part of you already knows that being accepted is worthless if it comes at the cost of your identity. That silence is more powerful than apology. That walking away is sometimes louder than staying. This isn't just about cutting people off. This is about cutting the cord between your worth and their permission. So now I ask you, Are you ready to be misread, resented, even feared? Because you chose to no longer beg. Are you ready to give up the illusion of harmony to gain unshakable peace? Are you ready to become the version of you that no longer asks, waits, or explains, but simply acts from power, not from need? If this message hit somewhere deep, if it reminded you of what you already knew, write it in the comments. I do not beg. Let's see how many of us are ready to live that truth, no matter the cost. And don't disappear yet. The next video is waiting, and it holds the piece you didn't know you were missing. Watch it, you'll understand why. I'll meet you there.